In this demo, we're going to build on what we just created using the same contact class. This time, however, we want to bind to a list of data. We need a contact generator. This is going to be a class that is going to substitute for a data service and generate a number of names for us to work with in our list. This has nothing to do with manipulating data in Xamarin. It is just a simple way to mimic a service that might provide a number of contacts. So we've got all these first names that I got from the U.S. Census Bureau, and then we're going to have a set of last names from the same source, and you can see there's quite a few of them, and I'm going to add my own just for fun. Now we need a way to put first names with last names, and we want this to be static so that we can access it without having an instance. We also want it to be asynchronous, so it will return a task of a list of contact, and we'll call the method createContacts. Because we want to randomly select from the lists, we'll add a new random object, and we will create a local list of contact called contacts that we can populate with our list. Let's do this quickly since this is not critical to data for Xamarin. So we're going to iterate through 25 names, create the first and last, and then set the contact and assign to the contact the first and last, and then take the first name and append to it at gmail.com. Now you'll notice that the first and last are placed into a method called initCap. Let's drop that in. And what initCap does is to create a character array from each name and then set the first letter in each name to initial cap and all the remaining letters to lowercase. So that's going to create a list of 25 names for us, in fact 25 contacts for us. So let's return that list of 25 contacts. With that in place, let's go back to main-page.xaml, and here we had been binding to the first name of a single object. Let's take that out because now we're interested in binding to a set of contacts. So we'll set our label text to just contacts, and because this will act as a header, we're going to set the font size to 20. Now comes the fun. We're going to create a list view, which is a view to handle lists as you might expect. We're going to set its name equal to contact list, and this is very important. We're going to set its item's source to a value that we'll bind to, and that value is contacts. That'll be a collection called contacts in binding contact. And then we're going to set an event handler, item tapped, which will be handled in a method called onItemTapped. Inside the list view, we can place anything we want. We can create a header, but what we're going to do now is to create an item template. And that says when you're creating the list, here's how each item should look. Within the item template, we create a data template, and now we need some kind of cell. The cell that we're going to use is the most flexible, which is a view cell. And that allows us to precisely define what we want each cell, each row in the list view, how we want it to appear. Inside the view cell, we'll create a view cell view, and we're ready to create our template. To create our template, since we want more than one view, we're going to use a stack layout, and now we can place as many views as we want in the template, and they will all be reproduced for each item in the list. The first items in the list are going to be the first and last name, so we'll create yet another stack layout whose orientation is horizontal. We're going to put inside of that two labels, one for first name, one for last name, set their font size, set them to bold, and set their color. Let's hit Control-I, which reformats so we can see this clearly. After the horizontal stack layout, while we're still in the stack layout for each item, let's create a final label which is going to bind to the email. For that, we're going to set a slightly smaller font size. Now we need to go to the code behind, take out the single contact that we had before, take out the property we had before for a single contact, and replace it with a list of contact, which we'll call contacts. Because we want to use asynchronicity in getting our contacts, we're going to have the constructor call a private async method that uses task called init. And the first thing init is going to do is to set contacts to be a new list of contact. For purposes of debugging, we're going to create a local variable called list of contact that will also be a list of contact objects. We can now use await on our contact generator, and what we're going to call is the static method createContacts. Let's fix the list of contact to be a single list of contact, not contacts. Go back to our contact generator and make sure that that's returning an awaitable task. Now list of contacts can get the contacts from createContacts, which is very similar to getting it from a data service, except hardwired. We can now set our public property contacts to that list of contacts. Yes, you are correct. We could do away with list of contacts, but it's a good place to put a breakpoint and see what we're getting. Let's set our binding context now, and we're setting it to this. That is the main page itself, because that's where the public property contacts lives. And so that's what we want to bind to. That's the object that has the properties to which we're binding. Let's go back to XAML and see that. We're binding for the item source to contacts, which makes sense. That's our public property within the object that is serving the binding contact. In the CS, the backing file, we now need to create that method. So let's come down below our init. We know that it's going to be public void. It's called item tapped on item tapped. That's what it said in the XAML. And now we're going to add an item tapped event args as our event arg, because we get additional information that would otherwise not be available. We can set a local contact variable to the item property of the item tapped event args and cast it to be a contact. That should say if contact not equal null. In any case, we're going to provide to the viewer an alert. Display alert, as you can see, takes 3 parameters. The text that's going to go on top, that is the title. We're going to just have it say aha. Then the message, which we're going to use with a string formatted to say you selected, first name and last name. And then what it calls the cancel text, which we're going to say okay. That's just going to close the dialog box. With that all in place, we're ready to try to run our application. So let's hit run. The application comes up. You can see that we've got the list. Each has a first and last name, and when we click on it, we get our dialog box.